Os. Ohayou gozaimasu, and welcome back to the Samurai Virtual Dojo with your host, Sensei Craig, for another foundation session. Today's foundation session will be a little bit more advanced. If you're a beginner or a novice, we certainly want you to give it a try. In today's foundation session, we're going to be exploring the relationship between the hip movement and moving between different stances. Today we're just going to focus on the three basic or main stances in Chidoryu: Zenkutsu-dachi, Neko-washi-dachi, and Shiko-dachi. We're going to look at how the hips work as we move between each stance, how they generate or help us generate speed, power, connection between the stances. That's coming up today, so get warm and I'll see you back here. Os. Okay, so why is the relationship between the hips and the stances so important? Well, as I said earlier, the biggest muscles in the body are around that pelvic floor, particularly your glutes, your butt. Okay, so activating those in the correct way, your gluteals, as you move or transition between stances will help you move more quickly and with more strength, etc. So let's have a look at what I mean. So when I'm stepping in to Zenkutsu-dachi, here, if I tuck in my pelvic floor, but otherwise have my body in a relaxed or neutral position, my hips should, or my pelvic floor position should naturally turn to an angle here. In order for me to bring my hips, what I'm going to call forward, I need to actually exert some force. I need to push or turn this back hip, this right hip around. That actually requires some force, some thought, some action. Okay, so from here, from our Heiko-dachi, if I just step in normally, my hips naturally turn to this angle here. I don't have a protractor. Could be 30 degrees, 40 degrees, something like that. Anyway, let's call that out the natural angle from here. Okay, when I talk about the movement of the hips or the pelvic floor between stances, let's say I want to move from here back into Neko-washi-dachi, cat stance. Okay, can you see from here that my hips did not move at all? So how did I get back from there? Well, what I did was I pushed with my front foot and basically slid back. Now that's one way you could do it. However, what I'm talking about us learning today or working on today is actually using a pivoting movement of the pelvic floor, turning the pelvic floor really quickly, engaging the gluteals to help us move faster. So instead of from here simply pushing back into cat stance, what we're going to do is activate our pelvis and use our muscles to move us forward or back. Same into Shiko-dachi from here. My hips are in that, let's call it open position, which I'll define in a moment. And instead of just sliding or falling forward into Shiko-dachi, we're going to use the movement of the hips to generate a more explosive movement. More on that in a moment. Before I continue, just wanted to talk about a couple of quick definitions that will help us today and help you understand what I'm talking about. When I talk about your pelvic floor, in terms of your movement and fighting, I'm going to use two specific terms that I want to define for you now. Those terms are open, so your hips or pelvic floor will either be in an open position or a closed position. Now, why open or closed? Well, I'm talking about a door or a gate on hinges. Okay, so if you think about a door in its open position or its closed position, that's really going to help. So, let me define. Let's just use Zen Kutsudachi. When my pelvic floor is naturally turned to this angle, whatever it is, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, 45 degrees, we are going to refer to this as the open position, and I'll explain why. It's because I want you to think of your front knee, in this case my left hip and left shoulder as the hinges of a door, and the other side of your body over here as the door itself. So at the moment, the door is open. Here are the hinges, the door is open back. Okay, now when I turn my right side of my body this way and square my pelvic floor to the hinges here, let's think of this as the frame of the door here, I'm closing the door, therefore closing my hips. Okay, so let's have a look at that again. I'm opening the door by pulling back. Opening here. So that's why we'll call this position open pelvis or open hips. And we'll call this position closed. That's going to be really important. Open, closed. In fact, why don't you practice or follow along for a few with me. So, stand left or right leg forward, doesn't matter which. Make sure your stance is correct. So this back foot is at around 35 to 45 degrees approximately. Bend your front knee and just let your hips, pelvic floor sit in a naturally open position. So angled this way. Good. Now if it helps, you can use a Gakusuki to help you close your pelvic floor. So if we punch Gakusuki from here and push or turn that back hip, and our body becomes square, our pelvis becomes square, pointing straight forward, we're now in the closed position. From here, let's thrust and return the hips to the open position. Ready? Close the hips, or the pelvic floor, open. Close, open. Close, open. You can see I'm not too serious about my punch at the moment. It's just helping me to facilitate movement of the hips. Close, open. Close, open. Let's look at that on the other side of the body. So from here, back foot, roughly 35 to 45 degrees. As I step in, allow your hips to turn to that natural open position. Don't force them open. Just let them turn. Good. Okay, again, use your Gakusuki to close the pelvic floor. Nice and lightly. Ready? Close. So bring that back hip around and open. Close. Open. Close. Open. Close. Open. This is probably a good time for me to mention a very common error at a novice level or a beginner level, and that is the collapsing of the pelvic floor, which is very common. So, if I turn this way, you see I've tucked my pelvic floor. Very common when first moving and learning to open and close the hips for people to close and get that anterior pelvic tilt in the pelvic floor. So that's very easy to avoid if you're conscious. So you tuck, hips are naturally open. When I punch, just think tuck or squeeze with your glute. So punch, and as you can see, because I've still got that tuck, as my hip has come around, this hasn't happened. Close, open, close, open, video here and practice that as much as you like. When you start to think and feel like that's pretty natural, you're doing that okay, I want you to join me back here for the next part of the session. Awesome. Alrighty, so now that we've got our open and closed pelvic floor position, let's just quickly have a look at that in cat stance. It's actually pretty identical in terms of what's happening here, even though the stance has changed. So with my back foot, again, at a roughly 35 to 45 degree angle, of course in cat stance my stance is more narrow. If I just sit in my cat stance and relax, my hips fall, my pelvic floor falls into a naturally open position. So in order for me to close from the open position, I need to actually take some action there. I need to move that forward. Again, using a simple movement like Gyakuzuki, I can punch and bring my hips closed and then open. Close, open. This one could produce a little bit more strain on your body, particularly if you're not used to sitting in cat stance for long periods of time. However, I'd like you to pause the video and try some of this opening and closing in cat stance now. So, close, open, being one rep, maybe complete 20 reps. Change sides, complete your reps on the other side of the body, and then I'll see you back here. Awesome.